You're listening to the Identity at the Center podcast. This is the show that talks about identity and access management and making sure you know who has access to what. Let's get started. Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff. How are you?
Oh, not so bad. Yourself?
I'm good, man. It's been an interesting couple weeks. A lot of travel. We made it out to San Francisco. We did yeoman's work with the Identity at the Center podcast at the Octane conference. Had a fantastic time. Met so many cool people. Reconnected with old friends. And now it's back to normal life.
Yeah, somewhat. I'm literally just getting off of the plane and rolling into my home studio office here to get this recorded today. But yeah, definitely Octane was very cool. My first one. Definitely recommend it for folks who are interested in Okta or maybe a current customer or maybe kind of want to check them out. Definitely want to give a shout out to the Okta team, Steven, April, Kenzie, Joel. I'm sure there are other people that I'm going to.
I was going to say, you just went down the danger route of like thanking people. You know you're going to leave somebody out who's like an important key person.
I try to give credit's due, but yeah, if I forgot, sorry, didn't list you there. But yeah, it was a lot of it was a great time. Definitely looking forward to doing something like that again. I'm sure you and I are working some things for the future that might help with that. But yeah, so thanks to the Octane crew, thanks to RSM for definitely sponsoring us to get us out there and putting us up in the hotel so we can actually do that kind of stuff. My favorite part of the conference was literally the last 5 minutes of our last show, where the walls are crumbling around us. So it was hey, the conference is over, and the crews just came in to start tearing that place apart, and we were in this little room, and the walls are shaking, and it's like the Matrix kind of being deconstructed around us as we're finishing out.
Yeah, well, I guess my number one best thing about the conference was the snacks. They did a great job with the snacks. They did a fantastic job. No, but having the session with Eugenio Pace was kind of a highlight to me. We were joking around afterwards because he was talking about, his path into identity and access management. He's like, I was a Visual Studio developer, and I forget what year he said, but I was like, yeah, that's what I was doing around that time. Like, why didn't I start a business that sold for $6 billion?
Too much baseball.
Too much. Yeah. Too many hobbies.
Yeah, that was very cool to talk with Eugenio and Shiv. Definitely one of the highlight moments. But yeah, it'll be tough for me to forget just walls shaking around us as we're trying to do a recording. We didn't have that problem with Eugenio. That was a very fun episode. So don't go check that out. We have a whole list. I think we did 5 or 6 episodes on Octane, so people could check that out. But speaking of founders and things like that, we have another founder with us today. We're going to talk through some of the IAM trends to kind of keep an eye on. And this is coming from a CEO and a founder perspective. We've got Axay Desai. He's the founder and CEO of ObserveID. Welcome to the show, Axay.
Thank you for having me, Jeff.
Thanks so much for joining us. One of the things that we like to do when we have someone on for the first time is to kind of learn about their identity origin story. How did they get into IAM? Is it something that you chose, or did it choose you?
I mean, great question. So, my association with identity space goes back to early 90s, to be honest, when I started my career with the computer industry, right? So I used to work for Oracle Consulting, and as a part of the consulting organizations, that we go and implement a lot of Oracle products. And as a part of that, I came across Oracle's identity at the days in early 90s. And that's when I kind of started my association with it and kind of grew as the time passed by. About, I would say maybe 10, 12 years ago, I became an entrepreneur and started my own company. The first company I started was a managed service provider. And our organization used to work with this industry, various companies trying to help them meet their audit and compliance perspective, right? And this is when we kind of grew my association with identity space. Until about 2 years ago, I saw that the companies that we were working were really struggling, actually, from the identity and meeting their compliance and audit requirement, and especially from a security standpoint of identity security. And this is when kind of we launched our platform as well to help organizations to address this. So it kind of grew over the time, to be honest. And the longer I work in this space, my association with identity gets deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yeah, and now you're with ObserveID. I guess for those who aren't familiar with ObserveID, I'm looking at the tagline on the website: identity security for multi-cloud and hybrid environments. Give us like the 30 to 60-second kind of elevator pitch on what it is that you guys do and the problems you're looking to solve.
Certainly. So identity is basically a cloud native, identity centric resource entitlement and access management platform, right? In a very short and brief verbiage about identity, especially that focuses on observability and enforcement for hybrid as well as the multi-cloud environment. So that's what exactly the platform does.
Axay, you as a CEO, you must talk to your peers and other organizations. You must talk to a lot of clients and potential clients. And I'd like to kind of pick your brain around a few major trends that are happening in the IAM space. The first is converged IAM, which we started talking about that a few years ago when you started to see platforms that were doing multiple areas of IAM. And, Jeff and I usually use the term the triumvirate or the trifecta of IAM services, which is like SSO, IGA, and PAM. And so you saw some players um, who came out with platforms that do all three. But then what you've also seen is some of the major players, expanding into a second or a third tier. And in fact, today I was just looking at, you know, a, a page from ForgeRock where it's like cloud first identity governance. So, you know, we're at the Okta conference last week. They're, pitching a tent in the user lifecycle management, the privileged access management. Obviously, their mainstay, of course, is in access management, single sign-on, etc. But I wanted to get your thought because this seems like the tidal wave trend. Like it's the one that's kind of taking over the space, and I wonder if it spells the end for partnerships or some of the partnerships that have existed between firms. And then I'm also interested, like, how does this affect the IAM practitioner? Is this a good trend? Um, is it is this better for clients and buyers of IAM technology, or is this something that in the long run is going to hurt the buyer?
Excellent question, right, Jim? So I personally believe that it's a really a positive trend. I mean, we have been talking about convergence of all these various products for a long time, but never actually have executed on it, right? What I normally see into the business when I discuss with potential prospect or customers, they spend millions of dollars trying to implement this product, and they need multiple products to address that end-to-end identity security posture management. And with the fact that the shortage of the skilled labor set and the fact that we're, security is definitely a concern, but if it takes too long to implement or needs a specialized skill set, it becomes creates its own problem. So while trying to address some problems, you're creating some additional issues along the process. And so I believe it's a good trend. I think the organizations are looking for it. So to speak, not boil the ocean, to be honest, but address the problems on hand, as opposed to trying to bog down in implementing and managing these platforms and still not gaining what they're looking out of this product, right? Not only meet your compliance and audit requirement, but as the organizations are moving into the cloud, identity security is taking a forefront as well. So the integrated product, in my opinion, can address security as well as your compliance and auditing at once. And so I think it's a good trend, in my opinion.
What do you think about my comment or question of does this spell the end for partnerships? I remember way back that SailPoint, when they first came out with their cloud system, it was cloud single sign-on, so it was kind of like competitive to Okta. They wound up dropping that product because I think it really precluded them from partnering with vendors that are in that space, other vendors in that space. So I guess I'd throw it back to you. Like, is this going to kind of become the trend where each company kind of like tries to solve the entire problem themselves rather than complementing their suite with partners.
I certainly believe, at least in a short run, the partnership era is kind of coming, it's going to stall. And as all of the major organizations trying to add all this capability into their own product. And so that's certainly my belief that at least in the near short term features, that partnership process is certainly going to stall. And I think that's good, to be honest, for the organizations, in my opinion, because they'd rather deal with a single platform rather than dealing with these multiple vendors and then still try to integrate them, and still they are unable to gather what they're looking for, because in order to meet their requirements, they still have to do a lot of customizations to those products. So I really believe that, yes, I sort of agree with what you're saying, Jim. At least in a near future, I think that's definitely going to be put on a hold.
Jeff, I was thinking that for what you and I have done historically is advisory around IAM, or helping organizations kind of um, develop their roadmap for their IAM program. And part of that is always evaluating the marketplace. What are the technologies available and which one's right for us? What should we buy? And to me, this makes it even harder to read the landscape, right? There's just, if every vendor does everything, then how do we decide which one's right for us, right?
Yeah, a Band-Aid is a Band-Aid, right? At that point, I know it doesn't really matter. Yeah, it's a good question. I think we've seen this trend in the past, right? We saw some of the sort of the legacy IAM players like IBM and Oracle and others sort of build these behemoth. CA with another one, right? They have all these features and functionality to kind of make the platform, and then something comes along to disrupt it. Something like a SailPoint, for example, 20 years ago, or however long it's been, right? And then you have things like Okta coming in and kind of disrupting from an authentication standpoint. At some point, I think CyberArk probably was a disruptor. I don't know if that might be kind of hard to grok right now, but I see this kind of as a cycle as people are going around and thinking about this. And it does make it difficult when you have these large platform plays. I think we've been in this transition from on-prem to the cloud for 2 decades now, it seems like. There's probably a third or fourth decade still ahead, because there are still a lot of companies who are still on-prem. Jim, you and I see these pretty much every day as we're working with clients that still have a pretty heavy on-prem footprint. It takes a while for enterprises to make a shift that momentous from an IT standpoint. I'm seeing fewer of those that are 100% cloud. A lot of them are in this hybrid scenario. And it could be because they have maybe this legacy application that just doesn't work in the cloud, and it's vital to their business, and their business is kind of beholden to this one app that kind of drives, everything that they do. So I think we'll see this, kind of continue on for probably another 10 years or so, unfortunately. And then you start getting into the multi-clouds, like, okay, well, let's talk through AWS, and Azure and Google is sort of like the three primary players. I think having the capability to be able to spread across all three of those is probably where things will end up. There will be people who want to use, AWS for its strengths, Azure for its strengths, et cetera. So you start getting to this platform. Okay, well, how are we going to do IAM across multi-cloud? It's probably going to be some sort of, platform that bridges across those. And we're seeing sort of like this meta layer of translation taking place. We've talked with a few different players in this space. Axay is one of the players in this space as well with ObserveID, to kind of help organizations really manage across those three different environments. So I don't think it's going to get easier. I think it'll continue to get harder and more complex, but there will be solutions that will help simplify some of that from a go forward perspective.
Yeah, you've really just touched on, a big trend towards wanting to get IAM as a service. You also see, so what I see with a lot of clients is moving toward, or having already moved toward, an MSP, MSSP delivery model. You can see those two things converging to being, I just want to have identity management as a service. I want some 800 number or some ServiceNow inbox that my folks can go to and request access, and somebody else takes care of it all. So, you know, pay by the drink, whatever you want to call it, but this idea that, I want to be able to bundle services as well as bundle my IAM technologies. I could see that becoming a trend as well that maybe we're talking about next year.
Yeah, I don't care how the pizza's made. I just want the pizza.
Yeah. Well, one thing I would like to add, Jim, here is, we have been talking to a lot of mid-market companies, right? And they, especially for the greenfield, like large corporations who have already implemented some sort of a solution, it's really hard for them to kind of move away from it. But the reality is the identity issue is across the board, whether it's enterprise customers or mid-market as well, right? And a lot of mid-market companies, whether you're talking about any financial institute, CPA firm, whatever you talk, they are shying away from implementing these solutions because of the fact that there is too many products, very expensive, takes too long to implement, and the return on investment is just not there for them, right? So this converged product or platform that we've been talking about is resonating extremely well among them. If they're going to look for multiple platforms, they'd rather have one single integrated platform that serves that problem. So,
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the mid market because I think it's the segment of the market that sometimes gets ignored. Um, so many vendors are chasing after the big household name logos. Um, and I think, it's my go to saying with Jeff is like, who needs IAM? Everybody needs IAM. Well, the middle market needs IAM. And I think the default fallback is like, hey, we're a Microsoft shop, but that will only get you so far, especially if you've got, different ERP, different CRM, and you're integrating all these different platforms, maybe a Salesforce or something like that. So if you've got a heterogeneous environment, you've got more of a need for an IAM system that, you know, call it converged IAM, but can integrate with all these different vendor-based technologies. So let me shift to the next trend that I wanted to pick your brain on because I know you guys spend a lot of time focused on this problem as well, which is the multi-cloud. So it's organizations that have a presence at AWS, Azure. More and more, we're seeing Google Cloud, and have to manage the IAM for those infrastructure or platform as a service providers. They have to have the same level of control over identity and access that they have for the traditional on-prem environment. And what we're seeing more and more in the middle market is organizations leaving behind the the traditional on-prem data center and trying to get as much as they can, all cloud. And you hear about cloud first, but some organizations, especially younger organizations, are really making this shift or have already made this shift to be fully cloud. But managing IAM across multiple cloud vendors is tough, right?
yeah, I mean, you brought a great question, right? So cloud first is definitely a valid strategy, right? I mean, that's what every organization is kind of adopting nowadays. But the cloud first approach will not lead into a uniform environment, especially from the identity perspective. And the on-premises environment, as we know, primarily were static for the most part. Once you deploy in your data centers, there's very little change that's happening other than creating users and moving the users. And so the traditional platforms, IAM platforms, are working just fine. You would go and basically audit your environments on a monthly or quarterly basis and you approve them and you're done for the most part because it's kind of secure through multiple different ways, whether it's sitting into, isolated network or sitting into your own data center. There are multiple ways to secure it. But as everybody is adopting this cloud first strategy, that's changing because now you're out in the open world where your resources are much more dynamic. You would add the resource, you remove the resource like constantly ongoing basis. And it's becoming a need in today's environment where you're constantly kind of monitoring as well as discovering this entitlement along with your accounts and optimizing them. And this is where the whole cloud infrastructure and download management sort of born out of that.
Yeah. So I I feel like the challenges for the IAM practitioner, well, maybe not the challenge, but the desire is, all right, I can manage IAM on my on-prem network just fine. I've got my IGA system. I've got my IDP. I've got my privileged access management tools. Why can't I just use those for the cloud? Or how far can they get me? And then what do I need to go above and beyond that?
Yeah, I mean, so again, great question, right? So the problem with the existing platforms are indicated because they're not dynamic in the nature itself, right? So they're more of, if you remember the old days where we would configure and then run aggregations on a nightly basis or once a week kind of a thing. Well, that scenario doesn't apply anymore in today's world because the infrastructure is much more agile and much more dynamic. And then on top of it, that infrastructure as a core is adding a whole different layer on how these resources are being accessed constantly. And the third layer is the identity access management that multi-clouds are providing. They all have their own model. So there's no uniform model across the board. So if you have a multi-cloud, you don't know if we are following which model you're following it. And this is where I think CIEM adds a lot of value, where you can bring a lot of uniformity across.
Right. And could you explain to the audience just what CIEM, I always call that KEEM, but could you give us an overview of what KEEM is?
Yeah, KEEM, there are multiple ways to pronounce. Some people call it CIEM, some call SIEM, some call KEEM, of course, but I've heard KEEM a lot lately, to be honest. So I think it looks like everybody's kind of concentrating on KEEM, which seems to be the right word, and avoids a confusion with SIEM at the same time. So again, cloud KEEM is nothing but, as I indicated before, it's more of a cloud native technology focusing on more of the cloud infrastructure entitlement. It includes the optimizations, entitlement optimizations in the cloud, continuous resources, as well as entitlement discovery, along with the visualizations in real time, which is what kind of compromises the CIEM mode.
Right. And so, in terms of what it stands for, it's Cloud Infrastructure Entitlement Management,
Correct.
CIEM, right? So, yeah, I definitely feel like that's a big piece of the puzzle. Jeff, are you having any thoughts here in terms of this cloud management challenge?
Well, before I even get to the cloud manager, I'm thinking there needs to be like some sort of like dictionary or book or something to try and keep up with all of the different acronyms we have in this space. Keem, Kim. What if your name is Kim? Do we have Kim on things?
Kim Commando, remember her?
Kim Commando. No, she was a cartoon or something.
No, she had like an IT radio show that was popular through the 90s and early 2000s.
Oh, I don't know. You're really old, so I have no idea what that is. Multi-cloud. I think it's not going away, obviously. I think the strategy that I see with a lot of companies following is they would like to be on one cloud for the sheer cost savings and simplicity of managing it. But there's always this wrinkle that comes through. And, hey, we are, Microsoft shop. So of course we're using Azure. And then you start talking to the business like, oh yeah, we use AWS over here, or we use GCP, over here for something else. So I think it is important because what happens is if you don't know about it, you've lost the visibility of it, which means you're going to have a very difficult time trying to protect it. The challenge becomes is that all three of these vendors have different ways of managing identity in the cloud. There is no standard for this is how we're going to set up an account across the different cloud providers. So you have to have not only the knowledge but the expertise to be able to manage all three of those things. And at least right now, identity as a industry and a field is hot. It is difficult to find people who have the in-depth knowledge across all three. So being able to effectively track what is going on within those environments from an identity perspective, and then have the necessary, skills, insight, know-how, business process to be able to manage across those different environments is going to be key, because people are not saying, "Hey, let's not move to the cloud." Everyone is going to the cloud. How quickly they do it is the question. It is not, "Oh yeah, we're going to go back to on-prem because it was better." Nobody is doing that. So this is, if you're already struggling with it, right? You got to get your hands around it. If you're planning on going to it, you should be planning on how are we going to manage the identities within each of those clouds as well.
I feel like
Yeah,
Axay was alluding to something that um, is not necessarily. I don't think it's necessarily a multi-cloud or even a cloud problem. It just happened to these things kind of came up around the same time that public clouds became available. So it's containerization. In other words, just breaking the model that you have to have a server to run software or even a VM to run
Yeah.
software. It's like now you're just running containers and then DevOps. So you could do all these things if you have your own data center that you run yourself or a private cloud. Um, but I think organizations are saying, hey, when we move to AWS, we're going to do DevOps, or it's a it's an application or some initiative that the organization is taking. We're going to build some new platform or application. We're going to do it at AWS, and we're going to do it right this time. And then so they go and they build this great IT engine, and they try to not get the security people involved because they're just going to slow it down. Then the security people are like, "Hey, this thing's secure, right?" Like, "Oh, I better check, make sure it's secure." Oh my goodness, like I don't even know what's going on here. So I think it's kind of like an education is the dev world, the infrastructure world is changing so rapidly, and what we've been doing in our own data centers for 20 years really hasn't changed all that much. We went from servers to VMs. Well, now that we're going to containers, it's like a whole new ball game.
Axay, I know you wanted
yeah.
to chime in there. What do you got to say about this?
Yeah, what I was going to say is you're absolutely right, Jim, right? So what we noticed in the industry is a lot of time the companies who go through these compliance and audit requirements, they definitely have hybrid environments. But as soon as they start talking about the cloud, they all have multi-cloud. They definitely have more than one cloud. But when the auditing and compliance comes, they're lost. They don't know how to really respond to that. And so for a lot of time, they're just ignoring. I've seen simply ignoring it. They try not to bring that up unless it becomes an issue. And so I think the security professionals are still catching up and still realizing that this cloud identity security in the cloud is a real problem. And education is definitely is required, especially in multi-cloud and you know getting these containerized or AKS or various functions that we know that nowadays people are using it along with the infrastructure as a core. All that collectively make it so complicated that security professional does not want to actively address these issues because they don't know how to. So education is definitely warranted here.
So the third area that I wanted to bring you back to, it kind of feels like it was a trend that's kind of losing steam. I want to get your opinion on this. User behavior analytics or user and entity behavior analytics. So it's like Exabeam was like the company nobody could stop talking about a couple years ago. And I was really jazzed on it because the vision of being able to understand what is normal behavior versus what is anomalous behavior to me sounds like exactly what is needed to stop an attack while it's happening. But I think a lot of organizations found it's like, you know, the vision's great, putting it into practice is probably a little more difficult. But I want to throw it to you. What are your thoughts on user behavior analytics?
Absolutely. So I personally believe that user behavior analytics is very important in being proactive to address these issues, right? So there's always a debate versus reactive versus proactive. I mean, there are a lot of platforms and tools out there that you can be reactive to. You can collect a log and you can analyze and then you can respond to it. But in order to stop these cyber attacks, you have to be proactive. And how do you how do you stay proactive? How do you find anomalies, right? Unless you do some sort of a user behavior analysis or some predictive analysis, whether it's AI, ML, or whatever that may be, there's no other way to predict at the moment. I'm sure a lot more research and development needs to be done, but I believe it adds a very important component to reduce or mitigate these cybersecurity risks, especially identity-related cybersecurity risks. So I believe it's here to stay. Is there more work needs to be done? I'm sure there's more work needs to be done in order to make it more usable and really useful in the real world. But it's a definitely important aspect of what we do to address.
How do you see the market addressing it in the future? Is it a feature of products, networking products, or do you feel like this is core IAM functionality becomes a best of breed, product approach?
It's definitely a feature set, and I must tell you that we offer that feature in ObserveID as well. We essentially call and access detections, and based on various anomalies and user behaviors, we have an ability to take an automated action. So it's certainly a feature within our platform, and I see a lot more platforms offering that. Another thing I must point out, Jim, is every time we speak, we talk to prospect, they all are like really interested. How does your access behavior work? Or how does the user behavior analysis work? And they're like intrigued and they want to know more about it. So we certainly see an interest in that functionality in the marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me like the vision's spot on. It's who's going to be able to execute and make it into something that just works. Um, so Oxy, you've been super generous with your time. This has been a really fun conversation. You and I had a chance to connect earlier in the week and, kind of preparing for the show and everything. And we started talking about all the travel that I've been doing. I'm not sure how much travel you've been doing lately, but um, you did mention that you really enjoy traveling. So I, it's our tradition around here to end on a lighter note. We spent the last half hour talking about all these heavy IM topics. So let's talk about travel for a minute. What is your favorite or best travel experience? And what I'm looking for here is something that the listeners might say, I think I'd like to do that as well.
Yeah, great topic, Jim. So I must tell you that I'm a travel freak, along with my family. I've been to, I would say, at least 20 plus country myself, and my family pretty much more or less similar. We try to go to visit at least one new country almost every year, maybe even more than once in sometimes. And my best experience, I would say, is going to Iceland in the winter, watching Northern Lights. I think that experience was phenomenal. I learned about Northern Lights since I was a kid, all right? And I was fascinated since then. I'm sure everybody is, for the most part, who knows Northern Lights. And so we had an opportunity to go to Alaska. As you know, that you can watch Northern Lights from a lot of different locations around the world. We went to Alaska about I would say maybe 5-6 years ago. We were chasing and we couldn't really see the Northern Lights. And so I had another opportunity to go to Iceland 2 years ago. In the middle of the night, clear sky. We're watching, we would wake up in the middle of the night, drive all the way into the national park and sit there in the open, in the freezing cold to watch the Northern Lights. But it was so real. It was just a fascinating experience watching these colorful lights. I would say that everyone, who can afford or has a time to go should have that on their bucket list, to be honest.
So Iceland or the Northern Lights?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
so
right.
I think Iceland has always been one that I've wanted to do as well. They've got the geothermal pools there, right? So you can go and
Yes, they do.
swim in hot water, and it's completely, I guess, vented from the core of the earth.
Yeah, so we would go in the middle of the night to watch Northern Lights. Once we see the Northern Lights, we go and jump in the geothermal pool in the middle of the night at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning. So it was a fantastic experience.
That sounds awesome. Hey Jeff, how
Yeah.
about you? You have to have had some pretty good travel experiences.
Yeah, I've been pretty fortunate. Before I get to mine, I was just kind of pondering here. I think more people should travel. And I wonder if it's, and especially visiting other countries, is it easier for the Eastern Hemisphere to visit other countries because there are just so many more that are connected to each other versus, on the US side, maybe in the Western Hemisphere, where you basically got two oceans that basically kind of separate you, other than going, north or south, either to Canada or, down to South America, stuff like that. It's got me thinking here is like, okay, well, I wish more people would travel, but it's expensive to go across, a big ocean, especially, flights these days. So just food for just no need to like bring it out. It was like, all right, well, I just kind of came to my mind. Like say my best travel experience is probably, I got two actually. Paris. I went with my wife to Paris for our 10-year anniversary a while back. And we stayed near the Louvre and had like basically kind of like this like 2-bedroom apartment basically with a kitchen. So we kind of lived like Parisians for basically 2 weeks. Got to go down on the street, get fresh bread. I made liberal use of Google Translate to get things done. Got to see all the stuff that is in Paris. It was just a fantastic experience. I would go back in a heartbeat. The other one is a visit actually I made to Chennai, India. Wow, actually 10 years ago, roughly. So, kind of my first international travel and going to a completely opposite side of the world. 19 and a half hours of flight. Uh, getting off at the landing in Chennai and then walking out and just seeing this sea of humanity of just waiting for people waiting to pick up at the airport. So and we had really great hosts and able to kind of help me make sure that I didn't do anything too stupid and keep me honest with things. So I think those are my two favorite things, but I would definitely echo Axay here is get outdoors, see the world, especially visit other countries. I think that is a big eye opener for a lot of people. Kind of realize that your ranch dressing isn't the most important thing in the world. Jim, what about yourself?
Well, I've got to echo your comment about travel and that you wish more people could do it, because one thing I realized, so I traveled to Western Europe in my 20s or early 30s. And one thing I realized was like, this is the first time I've gone somewhere and been the quote unquote foreigner. Like I was the outsider, right? And it was all the people who made me feel welcome. That's like, this is the way it should be. And you don't realize that when you've never been in that position. There's no learning like actually doing. And when you're in that position, then people go and extend the olive branch to you and make you feel welcome. You just that much more want to do that yourself. So I could pick some cool experience like that, but I'm going to actually pick a United States location myself. But it is what I think is one of the two coolest states. So you have Alaska, which I've never been to. The one I was going to choose is Hawaii. I've been to Maui, Hawaii, and to me, that's where it's at. And I stayed at the Ritz Carlton, so that made it even 100 times better. I mean, they know customer service like nowhere else. I mean, that is the best hotel I've ever been to in my entire life. Their customer service was fantastic.
It's interesting that you're talking about a hotel and mentioning their customer service, not like the rooms or the bed or the food. I mean, it sounds like a real 1% problem here, is what I'm hearing, Jim.
So no, like we brought a bottle of champagne down to the pool. It was a glass bottle of champagne. And rather than somebody coming down to say, you're not allowed to have glass at the pool, they brought a plastic carafe and said, would it be okay if we put your champagne in this carafe? So rather than reprimand, I mean, that's a total mindset. Like, you'd expect to be reprimanded.
Yeah. Treat everybody like the toddlers and their champagne. You can't have glass by the pool. Let's put that into a plastic sippy cup for you.
Yes.
Um,
Hey, we were happy because it wasn't like take your darn glass and get out of our pool.
Right, exactly. Or you pull the power move and you just, you open the bottle and you chug it right there, the entire thing in front of them.
Next time.
Axay, I am totally, I'm sold on the whole Northern Lights things. That is a bucket list trip for me for sure. I would love to go to Iceland, Sweden, sort of Denmark, Norway, that whole area, and be able to try and take it in. So I am very jealous of the story that you just told about the lights. I mean, that is badass.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, why don't we go ahead and wrap things up before we get things kind of cleared out for this week? Any final thoughts, Axay? What should people be kind of taking away from this conversation? I know we kind of talked about a few different trends, kind of from your perspective as a CEO and as a founder. Converged IAM, multi-cloud, UBA, sort of this IAM platform, kind of thing that's out there. What is the one thing that if someone listened to this, this is what you want them to take away?
I think if I have to say, Jeff, one thing is identity is becoming a security problem now, right? Identity should not be looked upon just as audit and compliance requirement. I think that's the one single most important thing that's coming out, especially moving every organizations in the cloud. Identity security should be on the forefront of everyone's thought process.
Jim, how about yourself? How do you want to close out this week?
I think on the converged IAM front, I think it is all of us need to do our homework in terms of developing our requirements and then really understanding beyond the checkbox compliance. So you're going to have a growing number of products now that do all the things, and it's on the consumer to make sure you do your due diligence, do your homework. I think one of the factors is going to be a lot of organizations are going to talk about what they can do and what's on the roadmap and kind of try to blur the lines. Or maybe they have an on-prem product and a cloud product, and yes, we can do all those things. Or are you talking about your cloud product, the one that you're talking to me about, or are you just talking about your portfolio? And then the third layer is, okay, how do you license your product? And when we're talking about all these different features, which ones am I going to get with the licenses that I'm interested in buying? So it's just, I don't want to say buyer beware. It's more make sure you do your homework. Make sure you really don't just look at like a table with a bunch of check boxes. It's much more than that.
Yeah. I just realized this is going to go live on November 21st. So we're recording a Thursday before that, and it's Thanksgiving this week. So hopefully people have some time off. They get to enjoy with their family, friends, whoever, get some food and stuff like that. And if you have to work that day, I'm very sorry. Thank you for your service, I guess. We'll go ahead and leave it for this week. I'll have in our show notes a link to Axay's LinkedIn profile, as well as a link to ObserveID, observeid.com, so that you can kind of check out what he's been working on, as well as, links to Jim and myself for folks who want to reach out and go from there. So you can find us on the web, identityattthecenter.com. We're on Twitter, at least so far. It seems like it's slowly dwindling away with all the Twitter stuff that's going on, but we are there at IDAC Podcast. And we'll go ahead and leave it for this week. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and we'll talk with you all in the next one. Thanks for listening to the Identity at the Center podcast. If you like what you heard, don't forget to subscribe and visit us on the web at identityattthecenter.com.